workshops. I personally found it really interesting to be pushed on the way I was thinking about everything from bones to plastic litter and get some ideas about things that we can all be doing to change the way that we take action. So, see everybody in the back who wants to stay in your chair. So one thing that I want to point out is that we have titled the day Share Knowledge, Take Action, See Change. And in terms of sharing knowledge, if you look at the enormous number of people here who have given you advice from their corner and their knowledge, have shown how they're working with each other already and with all of you. And I think it's really exciting that, so we could have probably pulled out any number of the rest of you from the audience to have stood up and give us started the conversation rolling. And I think that does show that we're already starting down this road together. Does anybody have any questions for individual speakers, workshop presenters, or even for how work is looking for the future, how it's going to come up? Really?
So the program.
David
Your animation, the beginning of the annual about the big trails, you showed that animation, the second one fitted it there. Yeah. What it didn't tie up with was what you showed was the actual real life sightings, because they were occurring in Iceland earlier than they were occurring in the west coast of Scotland.
Yeah, that's right. So, can everyone hear me? Do I need to?
Yeah, so the question was about the drift modelling that I showed at the end of my talk that had been done by Andy Dale at SMASS, and how that ties in with the sightings and strandings that we're seeing on Iceland and the Faroes. And the short answer is that I think those initial models are good for what we saw in Scotland and Ireland, but they don't work for the case further north. So that's why we're rerunning those models to see whether or not it was one incident or a number of different incidents. Because, I mean, drift modelling is a dark art. It's obviously dependent on the data that you put into it, but one of the things that you can do is work out where cases have not come from. That's often as useful as saying they have come from here. So what we hope to be able to do is say, well, actually, from where the carcasses ended up, from the decomposition state of the carcasses, we are pretty certain that this wasn't a single event. This was at least two different temporospatial things that happened over the course of the summer. So watch this space.
On the theme of sharing, the wildlife world as a whole is plagued by a problem whereby different organisations don't necessarily share data very well. And it strikes me that there have got lots of different organisations involved in either live rescue or recovering sightings. How do we improve the way we share information between SMASS and SSPCA and VDLMR, and how do we make sure that when people send sightings in, they can be certain that that information gets used by everybody for the sake of the wildlife?
Unlucky Sarah.
So I think forums like this are a good starting place, and I think the fact that a lot of the individuals and the organisations that work in Scotland are here, and we're doing, some of the things we're doing are the same, but a lot of them are different but complementary, is a good indication that Scotland's doing this really well actually, and I think we should be proud in Scotland that we work together very well, and I think that we collaborate well too, and I think that as well as volunteers being a benefit to organisations who are kind of running these different programmes, that's a benefit to you guys too, because it means you get to be involved in all of these different projects, and hopefully they don't feel like they're too separate. I mean, I know if you're attending a live stranding or a dead stranding, or you're doing a shore watch, you report that information to different places, but hopefully you don't feel like those things are too disconnected. And I guess forums like this help us to feel more cohesive and be aware of what each other is doing. And I think from a political point of view, there are some different organisations involved, and we have different tactics, and there are different collaborations. But again, I feel like we work quite well together. And scientifically, the networks that we have in Scotland are they extend beyond Scotland, and so often a lot of the scientific data that's produced is regional, so we're looking at the scale that's more relevant to the animals. So it's not really about the humans, it's about animals in this ocean or that ocean, or this population of animals. So I feel like we're doing that, and I think the best way to keep doing that and to do it more effectively is to keep talking to each other. Don't know if anyone else wants to add any more to that.
I will. Can I add to that? There are also ever-increasing data sharing networks like the NBN Atlas of Living Scotland and also other areas of the UK and the Scottish Biodiversity Information Forum, who are working on national level and then expanding databases which will collect all of the various data that we collect and hold it so that we can make sure that a sighting that might be, we all know, sent into multiple different starting points is being identified and not overlapped. And there are currently big scale plans for those groups as to whether they can organize all of us who have our own databases and how we can make those transitions and those entry points fluid and easier. And so hopefully that will be the infrastructure that can underpin, because if you imagine all of the data that we have from acoustic to dead to live to something that you're standing here and the animals there, it's all different in the way it looks in the back end. And so those structures, I think, are coming. I keep being asked how we, so I think it's coming in that way as well.
I think it is interesting that point, because the people who are sending in the data through the various organisations in the various parts of the life cycle of the animal, it's the same person. You know, hands up everybody that's in Shorewatch, hands up everybody that's in BDMLR, hands up everybody that's in SMASS. Hands up everybody that's in CRU, hands up. Oh, wait a minute, yeah. So, you know, it's, we at this level are gathering all the information and then passing it on to, depending on where the animal is, how the animal is. So we're seeing a lot of things. It's just that what happens when it goes further up the food chain. You know, how much is integrated up there? And you get the one individual, it could be any one of us, or one individual who's dealing with it on various levels, and then but we're all reporting it to the same bit. Is it then getting shared at that kind of level too? You know, I mean, if I'm telling you about BDMLR sea life taken up, but then it has since passed on, so then I get the call about, would you mind getting some samples from it? Good. How well are they shared? How well is the details that I've sent to BDMLR shared with SMASS, for instance?
I'm going to slightly turn this question around. I think it depends on what you need to know as an individual or as the question that needs to be asked. I mean, we have access to these data. We can also target our efforts to collect more data for very specific things. But what we need from you is to know what are you seeing in field, in the ground. What projects are you working on where you think that the data that we collect either as individuals or as a whole is useful, and then we can sort of go and make sure that we get those information. The beaked whale stranding is a case in point on that. It's a pathology investigation without any pathology, but we talk to our colleagues who do drift modelling, we've talked to people who do live sightings, who have acoustic information, and from that we can try and piece together the various different bits of the puzzle. So I think that the data is there. We will always be able to, the advantage is it's a small field and people have kind of good working relations with each other, so you can always ring somebody up and say, by the way, I'm doing this piece of analysis, or I've been asked this question, do you have any information on that? So it sort of is about what questions you want to know as much as how we get those answers, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I see a butterfly, I know where to report the butterfly. If I see a stranded dolphin, I know where to report that. But what do I
is there a a specific place where I send a recording of a live dolphin? At the moment, I would send it to my own recording group, and it would eventually go on to NBN. But is that good enough?
I think we have the same or similar things in place for live animals as well. So at the Hebridean Male Dolphin Trust, for example, we cover the whole of the West Coast. We have an app, we have a website, you can report through that. WDC have specific sites, but yeah, it does depend a little bit. The same with the stranding. So if something's already dead, you know to go to SMASS. If it is live, it's BDMLR. It's quite similar, really, I think, with live animals as well. We do have quite good mechanisms in place for that. Through either WDC, HWDT, there's also Sea-Watch Foundation. They cover the whole of the UK, and we certainly provide all of our sightings data to those national databases as well. And then, like Alice said, to NBN, we share lots of data between all the different organisations, like Andrew said, when there's specific projects. I think actually the Entanglement project, where quite a few of us are working on, is a good example of that as well. So we're just working on collating all of those instances of entanglement, so working with BDMLR, SMASS, other reporting schemes, CRRU, to try and bring all of that information together. And I think actually, because we do have quite a good working relationship between the different organisations, that makes that a lot easier. At HWDT as well, we work with a lot of project students, universities, so we do try and get that data analysed and used as much as we possibly can. As far as we're concerned, there's no point in us going out asking for people to send us their sightings, doing all the surveys we do, if it's not going to be used to provide the evidence we need to change things at a policy level.
On your sorry, while you've got the microphone,
Yep.
I very much. I mean, the app that you've got is very, very good. Is there any plans to roll that out across the whole of Scotland or anywhere else? Because to be honest, I understand it was lottery funded, so therefore the IP presumably doesn't rest necessarily with HWDT.
Yes, so the idea of the app was always that in an ideal world, it would be used across the whole of Europe. It was very much a trial, really, that app. It's only been going for 18 months. We're still learning. There's still things we need to change and update, as I'm sure SMASS will probably experience soon too. And it takes a lot of money to have those kind of things. And obviously for us, we are regional at HWDT. We do just cover the West Coast. And we are looking to work with others. Ultimately, it would be amazing if we could have something like that for the whole of Scotland. It's just going to take us a little bit of time.
Right.
But, yes.
And the other thing as well is to have it so that it can be interrogated, because I believe at the moment it's very much one way. The data gets put in by, say, the likes of me as I put the data into the app, but then I can't interrogate the app to find out wider trends and things like that. Is that correct? Or
So you can't see wider trends, no, that's true, but you can see every single sighting that's been added. Right. So if you go to Whale through the web portal on the WhaleTrack website, the map is interactive, so you can filter by species, you can filter by date, you can click on each point, you can see all of the details of every single sighting that's been submitted through WhaleTrack. You can see if people have added photos. So that is possible. You can see top contributors, what the number one species is that's been seen. But obviously, further interrogation of that isn't possible. Most likely, the thing we struggled with when we were developing the app was actually the technology isn't there to really have that kind of interactivity at the level that we were trying to do. But NBN, the atlas that Alice mentioned, that actually is starting to do some of those things. You can add different layers. So the technology is starting to be there to provide access to everybody to be able to do that kind of thing.
Thank you.
That's okay.
There's a young man at the back who's been putting his hand up patiently.
No, it's fine. He changed his mind.
Oh, you changed his mind.
How much work as organisations are you doing at school level? And I mean like primary level, not just secondary and university.
So at HWDT we certainly run an education programme, so Pippa is our education manager. We work with schools as young as nursery age, right up to then universities, adult education as well. It's part of our ethos at the Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust is to make sure that children in the local communities have access to the information. So we go in and we're actually developing a programme just now about photo ID. So going in and talking about Nobble, making sure that they know which animals are that they can see from the coast. It's really important to us. And WDC.
Our education officer is sitting right there. And likewise, we do programs locally and nationally. Okay. If there are no outstanding questions, what I'm going to do is take the day a bit full circle and invite Chris Butler-Stroud back up here to just touch on how we started the day with the collaboration and partnership working together and how he felt that this day has really informed that conversation. And then when he finishes, Marielle is going to come up here and give us some of the details about parking, pubs, directions, and all of that.
I just heard the word pub, so mine's going to be really, really short. Okay. This really is very short. First of all, I've been amazed, and just want to thank everybody for the opportunity to come up. I'm not really allowed out much. I'm not sure that's because whether I scare people or I just shouldn't speak sometimes. But it has been a real pleasure to come up. I do love this part of the world, and it is amazing to be somewhere where there are cetaceans so close. And so I look at you with envy in terms of the things that you're able to do. Living in Somerset, which of course is absolutely really close to the coast, has its own limitations, has its own beauty as well, but I am very envious. I just wanted to say I've learned a few things today. I've tried to find ways to memorise things. So I've been learning from George that different whales and dolphins have different musical tastes. So striped dolphins like flat music, whereas common dolphins like disco. There was something about groovy groups. This gets worse, seriously. This gets worse. Porpoises like Shakespeare. I think it's Richard III. There's something about curved spines on the bed. I don't know if anyone watches Pointless, but I now know from Sorka that there's a perfect question about how many countries can you name that Sorka has influenced in terms of picking up plastic. I've got Cameroon, I've got Australia, and I've got Norway. Everyone else can have all the other ones. I was struck by Emma and the presentation she did in terms of recognising things. And it was fascinating, and I was sat there trying to identify, and I think a couple of us got harbour porpoise, we felt good about that one. But the bit I was really taken by was the bit where she was going about, well, and I was out in this hurricane, and it was really difficult to see. I was thinking, what are you doing out in the hurricane? Please be safe. But seriously, what is amazing, I think it's the question that was asked earlier, which is about the chance to cooperate. And what I get to see a lot of is hard science being translated into policy, and it's our job at WDC and other organisations to make sure science gets taken to the decision makers that we wish to influence, and at the end of the day that it's executed into something real. It's no good just doing the sightings, it's no good just recording the information. What we want at the end of the day is to take all the passion that we see in this room and beyond this, in the public as well, and actually see that turned into progressive conservation measures, which means not only we're protecting the whales and dolphins that are out there, but actually that those populations become better, they start to thrive, and they start to return to the population levels that they should be. Of course, that's all going to be affected by climate change, but so what? Let's still try and do everything we can to see those oceans recover to the baselines that they should be. Because once they start to recover, then something starts to recover in our own souls as well. It's a personal thing, but I actually believe that as we see the environment repair itself, we will start to repair ourselves as human beings. I think also that the question about how we cooperate as organisations, it's always a challenge. But if you take the passion and the commitment that really exists, be it in the commercial sector, be it in governments, in agencies, lots of these have constraints on them, lots of them are busy, but nearly everyone I've ever met in those sectors actually do have a deep passion themselves. They're just sometimes a little bit more limited because they have the constraints around them of government and things, but they are still wanting to see the same things as we do. Our job is to encourage them. Sometimes it's our job to push them. Sometimes it's to push them close to the edge so they can make a choice. But it is also to recognise that they are mostly on our side, and therefore it's a cooperative act that we want to work with at the end of the day. And from scientists all the way through, you are making the difference in terms of the science that's being produced. The reality is, 30 years ago, it was more difficult because the science was selective, it was closed off, there was cooperation and things, but now it's opening up. And that transparency means that we can make sure that we can be held to account ourselves, as organisations, as individuals, and as scientists, that we're actually taking that information. And the difference, of course, between the scientists who will just study and watch a population as it declines, and those who are like the people in this room, who actually want to take that science and make sure something happens at the end of the day, is huge. And we should celebrate those of the scientists around here who are real conservationists and want to do something. But they can't do it without your support. So, in closing, I just want to say thank you again. It is down to you as individuals, and then the collective sharing and the movement that comes from that. You are making a difference. And I think if we look at some of the information Andrew was talking about in terms of what we saw in 2018, both in correlating the strandings and the sightings information about beach whales, I mean, I saw that and I almost was shuddering and thinking, what's happened to that population of beach whales out there? Have we lost subpopulations? Is there something traumatic? And for me, that looked like the old Soviet runs for the submarines that we used to see in the 70s and 80s. But it's that information which has come from you which will allow us to go back and challenge. Yes, MOD may have come back and said at the moment they won't say, but there are people in MOD who will be concerned. There are people who are on ships in the Navy who actually love the oceans as well and will be concerned, and that information will start flowing. And with encouragement, we may be able to get information back out of it. So at the end of the day, please keep doing what you're doing. Please keep cooperating. Please keep sharing. We will do our best to make sure that information does come together and does come collated and actually turns into something positive. Because at the end of the day, you will be protecting whales and dolphins, and for that, we're all very grateful. Thank you very much.
Today for today. Just a little comment, if you drove here today and your car is in the car park here, you will need a token to get out. They are £1, you can get them from the little token machines just as you leave the building. If you don't have a £1 coin on you, it only takes the coins. Look at the person on your left, see if you can do some bargains there, or your right for that matters. The reception will have some change as well, but not very much, so see if you can get it with £1 codes, that would be great. If you did not drive here today, I saw a lot of taxis arriving this morning. I've got a few spaces in my car, I'm sure other people will have as well. So maybe it's an idea if we just outside amalgamate people who need a lift into town, and whoever has a space in their car to give people lifts, then we can all see if we can make it there, so no one gets stranded. Sorry, I had to. Where to? Where are we going to, I hear you ask? Well, we've got a room in the Phoenix Ale House, which is a pub on Academy Street, so it's near the bus and the train station, and it's also near the big Rose Street car park, so there should be plenty of parking there. We'll be there heading as soon as we can, basically. Ellie and Alice will head up, so if you fancy catch up with a drink to talk to everyone here, that's hopefully all going to go there as well. Alright. Then please do make your way there. If you need any directions, please come and ask as well. Katie, Alice and I really like gin and tonic. So I think what remains, if all the speakers, before you leave, if you come see me and Alice to make sure we won't let you leave empty-handed. It will take a long time to hand it out now, so please come and see us before you leave the building. And I think that's sort of it for today. So what leaves is basically a massive Body bags, that's right. That's normal. To finish the day with body bags, all our SMASS volunteers who are in need of a body bag for scientific reasons of leisure. We have 5 body bags with us, so we don't have very many, but please come see Nick, who will be handing out body bags just outside. So these people, a massive round of applause for our speakers.
I don't even know. Oh yeah, I've got, that's nice. Bleaching grey whale.